He aimed a gun at me the first time we met. I laughed because somehow it was easier than admitting how much I wanted him to pull me closer instead. The night New York swallowed my fate, I didn't expect to end up face to face with the city's most feared man. His name was Adrian Moretti, the kind of man who could make a crowd go silent just by walking into a room. Power clung to him like smoke, dark, intoxicating, impossible to ignore. And me? I was nobody. Just Elliot, a broke art student who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong damn time. The night it happened, I was delivering a painting to a downtown gallery. Wrong address. Wrong building. The elevator doors opened to the sound of gunfire, and when I ducked behind a marble column, I saw him, Adrian. Calm in the chaos, his suit untouched by the violence around him, eyes like polished obsidian. He saw me too, and in that instant, something irreversible happened, something that neither bullets nor blood could erase. The next morning, I woke up in a penthouse I didn't recognize, silk sheets around me, and my wrists bruised from being dragged out of the crossfire. The view outside was breathtaking, Manhattan glowing under the sunrise, but all I could think of was his voice from the night before. "You saw too much." That was how it started. Not a confession, not a plea, a sentence. He didn't kill me. He kept me. At first, I thought it was temporary. He'd keep me locked up until his men cleaned up the mess, then let me go. But days turned into weeks, and he never mentioned release. Instead, he started asking questions about my art, my life, the way I saw color and light. It was absurd, this man who ordered deaths over dinner, now asking if I preferred acrylic or oil paint. He watched me paint once, silent in the corner of his office, smoke curling from the cigarette between his fingers. "You paint like you're trying to save something," he said quietly. "Maybe I am," I replied. "Then paint me," he ordered. It wasn't a request. It was a command. The portrait took 7 days. 7 days of his presence, the weight of his gaze, the way he leaned in too close, the strange quiet that fell whenever our eyes met. I told myself I was terrified, that I despised him. But when my hand trembled tracing the line of his jaw in charcoal, I knew it wasn't fear. It was something far worse. The night I finished it, he didn't speak. He just stared at the painting and then at me like both had betrayed him somehow. "You made me look human," he whispered. "Aren't you?" His lips curved, not a smile, not really. More like a wound reopening. No one's ever dared to say that before. But the world outside wasn't blind. Whispers began about the artist in the boss's penthouse, about how Adrian's moods had changed, how his temper had become unpredictable. His men didn't like me. I could feel it in the way they looked at me, as if I'd infected him with weakness. And maybe I had, because one night, when one of his lieutenants insulted me, Adrian snapped. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He just raised his gun and shot the man in the knee. For me. And when the blood hit the marble floor, I realized I wasn't a hostage anymore. I was a problem. His problem. We stopped pretending after that. He came to my room every night, sometimes drunk, sometimes silent, sometimes angry, always needing something he couldn't name. I'd push him away, curse him, tell him to leave, but when he finally kissed me, it wasn't rough. It was desperate. "Tell me to stop," he whispered against my lips. But I didn't, because I couldn't. The morning after, everything changed. He didn't look at me during breakfast, didn't speak. His walls were back, cold and impenetrable. Only when I reached for my coffee did I see the faint tremor in his hand. He was scared. Not of me, but of himself. Later that night, I found him on the balcony, cigarette glowing in the dark. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked quietly. "Every second," he said. "And yet, every second, I want it again." We stood there in silence, the city humming beneath us, two broken souls trying to rewrite the rules of who they were supposed to be. He reached for me not with command this time, but with caution, like a man touching fire. "I've built my life on control," he said. "But you ruin it. You make me weak. Then maybe you were never strong to begin with." He laughed, low and hoarse, before pulling me close enough to feel his heartbeat. "Or maybe strength isn't what I thought it was. But love, in our world, was a luxury no one could afford. When the police raided his operation 3 weeks later, my name was the first on their list of leads. Someone had talked, and it didn't take long to trace everything back to me. Adrian found out before they did. "You have to leave," he said, shoving a passport into my hand. "I'm not leaving you." His jaw clenched. "Elliot, if they catch you here, they'll use you against me." "I don't care." He grabbed my collar, eyes wild. "I do." The silence between us broke like glass. For the first time, I saw it, not the boss, not the monster, but the man. The one who had once believed love was a weakness, now begging to save it. "Go," he whispered, "before I change my mind." And just like that, the man who could destroy cities with a word, destroyed himself for me. I didn't make it far. 3 miles outside the city, the police stopped my bus. And the moment I saw the flashing red and blue lights, I realized the truth. Adrian had tipped them off. He'd sacrificed himself to protect me. By the time I saw his face again, months had passed. Courtroom lights, a bulletproof glass wall between us. He looked smaller somehow. But when our eyes met, the world disappeared again, just like that first night. I mouthed the words I'd never said out loud. "I love you." He smiled, faint, broken, real. And for the first time, I believed that maybe even in the darkest corners of this world, love could still mean something. The courtroom smelled like iron and fear. I sat there, frozen, while the judge read out a list of crimes so long it could have filled a book. Each word landed like a hammer, and each one belonged to him. To Adrian Moretti, the man who once ruled New York's underworld and now sat chained in a gray suit that didn't fit his power. They called him the Ghost King. But ghosts weren't supposed to bleed. When the guards dragged him away that day, his eyes never left mine. I thought I'd never see him again. And part of me wanted it that way. Because how do you survive loving someone who destroys everything he touches? But love, real, twisted, relentless love, doesn't fade just because the world says it should. 6 months later, I was painting again. A small studio on the Lower East Side. The kind that smelled like turpentine and coffee and rain leaking through old windows. I worked nights at a diner, slept on the floor, and told myself I was fine. Until the letters started coming. No name, no return address. Just a single folded sheet of paper inside. Always written in the same careful handwriting I could recognize even in a dream. "The nights are long here. I count them in shades of gray. You'd laugh I painted on the wall with dirt once, and the guards thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe I have. But I see you in every corner. You made me remember what it's like to want to live." I burned the first letter. Tried to forget. But when the second one came, and the third, I couldn't. "Elliot, if I ever get out, I don't want my empire back. I only want the truth. And maybe you." I told myself it was manipulation. That he was trying to pull me back into his world. But the more I read, the more I realized it wasn't power talking anymore, it was pain. It was late autumn when everything changed again. That night, the diner was almost empty. I was wiping tables when a man in a dark coat walked in, the kind of man who didn't belong in places like this. He didn't order food. He just slid an envelope across the counter. "From a friend," he said, and left before I could ask anything. Inside the envelope was a single photograph. Adrian, in a hospital bed, pale, his wrist scarred. The back of the photo had only 2 words written on it. "He's dying." I don't remember locking up. I don't remember the subway ride. All I remember is running through the cold, my lungs burning, my heart screaming. When I finally reached St. Augustine Federal Hospital, the nurse at the front desk looked up in surprise. "I'm here for Adrian Moretti," I said. Her eyes flickered with something pity, maybe fear. "Visiting hours are over." "Please," I whispered. "He doesn't have anyone else." Maybe it was the way my voice cracked, or maybe she just saw something human in the mess of me. She hesitated, then nodded toward the hall. "Room 327. The moment I walked in, everything inside me broke. He looked wrong. Smaller, thinner. The sharpness that once defined him had softened into fragility. The oxygen monitor beeped steadily beside him. a cruel reminder that time was still moving forward even when it shouldn't. When his eyes fluttered open, he smiled faintly. You came. I sat down, trembling. You bastard. You could have told me. I didn't think you'd come if I did. I wanted to hit him. Instead, I reached out and took his hand, the same hand that had once held a gun to my head, now cold and shaking in mine. What happened to you? He looked toward the window, voice barely above a whisper. They poisoned me. Inside. My breath caught. Who? My own men. The ones I left in charge. They didn't like that their king wanted to disappear. He coughed, blood staining the corner of his mouth, but he laughed hoarse, bitter. Funny, isn't it? You spend your whole life building power just to realize it's the thing that kills you. I stayed for hours watching him fade in and out of sleep. The hospital lights flickered, painting him in shades of gold and shadow. He looked nothing like the monster the world knew. He looked human, terrified, beautiful in his ruin. When he woke again, he stared at me for a long moment before speaking. Elliot, he said, voice raw. Do you hate me? I swallowed hard. I should. But you don't. No, I said quietly. I never could. He smiled again, faint and real this time. Then there's still something worth saving. 2 nights later, I was woken by the sound of alarms. I ran down the corridor barefoot, heart pounding, until I saw the doctors rushing into his room. I shoved past them, shouting his name. Adrian lay still, pale under the harsh fluorescent light. The machines screamed. The doctors yelled something about cardiac arrest. And I, the boy who once thought he could live without him, fell to my knees. Don't you dare, I whispered, voice breaking. Don't you fucking dare leave me now. For a moment, I thought it was over. The line on the monitor flatlined. And then faintly, impossibly, it spiked again. He lived. Barely. But he lived. When he was transferred to a secure recovery wing, I wasn't supposed to see him again. But the nurse who'd helped me before slipped me a visitor badge, whispering, he's been asking for you. He looked a little stronger this time, still fragile but alive. When I walked in, he smirked weakly. You're persistent. I learned from the best. He chuckled, coughing again. I thought I'd haunt you if I died. You already do. A silence hung between us, soft, fragile, full of everything we'd never said. Elliot, he whispered finally. If I asked you to run away with me, would you? I froze. Adrian, you can barely stand. Where would we even go? Anywhere, he said. Somewhere the world doesn't know us. That's not how it works. He looked at me with that same fire that once made men tremble. It is if we make it work. It should have been impossible. A guarded hospital, a notorious prisoner, a sick man barely clinging to life. But love and desperation are the greatest escape artists. 2 weeks later, under the cover of a storm, we did it. I don't know how he pulled it off. Maybe he still had loyal people somewhere, or maybe fate decided we'd earned one more chance. All I know is that when the alarms sounded behind us and the rain drenched my clothes, I felt his hand gripping mine, and for the first time in years, I felt alive. We made it to the coast. A small fishing town in Maine, quiet and gray. We rented a cabin under fake names. He was Andrew Moreland. I was Eli Morgan. For months, we lived like ghosts. He fished in the mornings. I painted in the afternoons. Sometimes we didn't speak for hours. Sometimes he'd wake screaming from nightmares, and I'd hold him until the shaking stopped. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't peaceful. But it was real. And real was enough. One morning, I woke up to find him sitting on the porch, watching the sunrise. His hair had grown out, a little silver creeping in at the edges. He looked almost ordinary except for the eyes. Those eyes would never belong to an ordinary man. Do you ever miss it? I asked, joining him. The power? The money? He shook his head. No. I miss being feared less than I miss being seen. I leaned against him. You're not invisible to me. I know, he said softly. That's the problem. I turned to him, confused. What do you mean? He hesitated, then handed me a small folded letter. My name was written on it. Read it after I'm gone, he said. My chest tightened. Don't you dare start this again, he smiled, placing a hand over mine. Elliot, I'm not dying today. I need you to know in case I ever do. I didn't want to read it. I didn't want to imagine a world without him. But when I finally did, days later, the words shattered me. You once told me love makes us weak. You were wrong. Love made me human. And being human, for me, was the bravest thing I ever did. If you ever paint again, paint me not as a monster, but as a man who finally learned how to hold something fragile without breaking it. I cried until the sunrise blurred into gold. Months passed. Seasons changed. The world forgot us, or maybe it just moved on. But we stayed, hidden, breathing, loving in quiet ways. He built a garden behind the cabin. I painted him among the flowers, light catching his scars. He'd joke about how I made him look too gentle, and I'd tell him that was the point. Sometimes, at night, he'd hold me close and whisper, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd met under different stars?" I'd smile into his chest. We didn't, and maybe that's what makes it real, because our love wasn't born of peace. It was forged in fire, and somehow it survived the flames. But peace never lasts forever. One rainy afternoon, a black car parked on the dirt road leading to our cabin. Adrian saw it first. His expression changed, not fear exactly, but something colder. "They found us," he said quietly. "Who?" "The past." He stood, pulling a gun from the drawer. The same one he'd sworn never to touch again. "Adrian, don't stay inside," he ordered. "If I don't come back, you run." I grabbed his arm. "No, not this time. We face it together." He looked at me, the boy he once thought he could control, now standing beside him, and for a moment, pride flickered in his eyes. "Together, then." He opened the door, and the storm swallowed us both. The storm tore across the coast, the rain coming down in sheets that blurred everything into motion. I could barely see the car anymore, just the outline of black steel and shadows moving inside it. Adrian stood in the mud, shoulders squared, the wind whipping his coat like wings. I stayed behind him, heart pounding, every instinct screaming to run, but I couldn't. Not again. Not when I'd already lost him once. The car door opened. 3 men stepped out, the kind of men who carried violence in their bones. One of them tall, lean, a scar running down his neck, smiled like a viper. "Well," he said, "if it isn't the great Adrian Moretti. We thought you were dead." Adrian's voice was calm, steady. "You should have left me that way." Scarneck laughed. "You know how it works, boss. The empire doesn't die just because you run away. Someone has to finish the job." Adrian shifted his weight slightly, blocking me with his body. "I'm not your boss anymore." The man's eyes flicked past him to me. "And this must be the reason you turned into a ghost." "Cute." Adrian's hand tightened on the gun. "Don't." "Relax," Scarneck said. "We're not here to kill your boyfriend. We're here for you. The new leadership thinks it's time you stop pretending you're not one of us." Adrian didn't answer. He just raised his weapon, rain dripping from his fingers. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the wind and the heartbeat in my throat. Then everything happened at once. Gunfire split the air. I dove behind the porch rail as bullets tore through the wood. Adrian moved like a storm, returning fire with precision, each shot echoing through the trees. One of the men went down. Another ran. The third circled toward the back of the cabin. "Elliot, stay down," Adrian shouted. But I saw it, the flash of movement behind him, the muzzle of a gun rising in the rain. "Adrian!" I screamed. He turned too late. The sound was deafening. The shot hit his shoulder, spinning him backward. I ran before I could think, grabbing the fallen gun and firing 1, 2, 3 times until the man dropped. Then there was silence. Only the rain and my own shaking breath. Adrian was on the ground, blood seeping through his shirt, staining the mud dark. I fell to my knees beside him. "Hey!" he gasped, voice weak but defiant. "You finally learned to shoot. Don't you dare make jokes right now," I said, pressing my hands against the wound. "You're going to be fine." He smiled faintly. "You always say that." "Because it's true." His eyes softened, searching my face as if memorizing every line. You remember what I told you once? About strength? I nodded, tears mixing with rain. I was wrong again, he whispered. Strength isn't control. This, letting someone see you fall, and still reaching for them. Then don't stop reaching. He closed his eyes, breathing shallowly. You made me human, Elliot. Don't let that be for nothing. I pressed my forehead to his. Then live, damn it. The ambulance came an eternity later. I don't remember the sirens, or the flashing lights, or the paramedics shouting orders. All I remember is his hand in mine, cold and shaking, until they forced me to let go. They took him away, and I followed the trail of red on the ground like it was the only thing left of him. Days passed, then weeks. The hospital said he was stable. Then they said he was improving. Then finally they said he'd wake soon. When I walked into his room again, the air smelled like antiseptic and hope. He looked pale but alive, bandaged and breathing. I sat down beside him, reaching for his hand. You're supposed to be indestructible, I whispered. Guess even kings bleed sometimes. He stirred slightly, eyes fluttering open. When he saw me, the corner of his mouth lifted. You didn't run. Didn't plan to. He squeezed my hand. Then maybe we get to start over. And somehow we did. 6 months later, we were living in a quiet town in Vermont. A small cabin near the woods this time. No secrets, no ghosts. He worked at a mechanic's shop under a fake name. I opened a tiny art studio downtown. People didn't know who we were, and for the first time, that anonymity felt like freedom. Sometimes, in the evenings, he'd help me stretch new canvases. He'd sit by the window, reading while I painted. When I caught him staring, he'd just smile. You still see too much, he'd say. That's why you fell for me. He'd roll his eyes, but his laughter always gave him away. One night, as the first snow began to fall, I found him outside, staring at the horizon. Do you ever miss it? I asked quietly. The chaos. He shook his head. No, but sometimes I miss the illusion of control. Then I look at you, and I remember why I gave it up. I walked up behind him, slipping my arms around his waist. You didn't give it up. You just learned what was worth controlling. He turned, pressing his forehead against mine. And what's that? My voice was soft. Me. He laughed, a real, unguarded sound that melted the cold between us. I'm still not sure who's the boss here, he teased. Good, I said, smiling. Let's keep it that way. Years later, when the world finally forgot the name Adrian Moretti, I painted our last portrait. Not of the Mafia king or the broken man in a hospital bed, but of two men standing in a field of snow, faces half-lit by sunrise. In the corner of the canvas, I signed it simply E&A. The gallery that displayed it called it Resurrection. When people asked what it meant, I always said, it's a story about love surviving its own ruin. But to us, it was more than that. It was proof that even the darkest hearts can learn to beat again. One night, years later, he found me sitting on the porch watching fireflies. He placed a cup of coffee in my hands, still warm, then sat beside me. You know, he said, sometimes I wonder if we really escaped. I looked at him, the man who once ruled shadows, now smiling softly under starlight. We didn't escape, I said. We evolved. He chuckled. Trust you to make it sound poetic. It's what you get for loving an artist. He leaned closer, his breath brushing my ear. Worth every scar. And in that quiet, surrounded by the hum of summer and the ghosts of who we used to be, I realized something simple, something certain. Love doesn't erase what came before. It redeems it. Years later, after he was gone for real peacefully, this time, his hand in mine, I found a letter in his desk drawer. Folded neatly, written in that same handwriting that had once found me across prison walls. If you're reading this, I'm somewhere better. Maybe watching you paint, maybe laughing at how bad you still are at coffee. You gave me something no one else ever did, a chance to be more than what I was. Don't waste your heart on mourning. Use it to live. And when you paint me again, don't make it sad. Make it like the sunrise. So I did. and as I finished that painting, golden light spilling across the canvas, his face half turned toward the dawn, I realized something I'd never dared to believe before. Even the cruelest stories can end in grace. Because sometimes the most dangerous man in the world doesn't destroy you. He saves you by teaching you that love, when it's real, isn't weakness. It's survival. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.